Well, thank you for returning this evening. I was kidding around with Kurt a little bit ago. I'm gone more than I am here, and I told Kurt, I said, now, pay attention tonight, because everywhere I go, this is what I do, except tonight I've asked Mike to come and do the presentation for us. So if you were ever curious, up at night, not able to sleep, wondering, what does Barry do? Now you'll know more accurately. The truth is, Mike and there's a peanut gallery in the sound booth. Lisa. I'm going to move on. Where was I? Now I'm going to go longer. I know where I was, Kevin. 6 years ago, this past January, Mike and Troy, his partner. Mike is the president of Cornerstone Estate Planning, and Troy is the vice president. The truth is, at the Memphis National Association about 10 or 12 years ago now, Mike and Troy came into contact with David Brown, the director of the foundation, and over a period of months, a relationship was formed, and now for the last 6 or 8 years, 9 or so years, the foundation has been involved in this, and I've been a part of it for the last 6 years. So you'll enjoy Mike. He's very informed, and he's helped a lot of families through the years. And I'm just going to get out of the way, Kevin, and it'll be all about Mike.
Thank you, brother. I'm so grateful to be here, to know where Barry actually does go to church. That's probably that's a good thing. I know Jenna's, holy, but I'm just not real quick on Barry doing that. I was with you guys when you were at the old building about, I think it was like in 15. I think it was January or so of 15. And I spoke there, and it was such a blessing when we drove up and I saw y'all's new building here. It's fantastic. My background is Free Will Baptist. My name is Mike Wooten. I'm the president of Cornerstone. I was married in Free Will Baptist Church. My children, matter of fact, I have a funny story. When we were at the Shallowford Free Will Baptist Church, and it wasn't near as nice of a building as this. It was a little bit older building, and we have 4 kids. And my son at the time was only probably about 3 years old, and he was kind of getting antsy. The pastor had gone on a little bit and hadn't landed the plane yet, Lisa. And so my wife started giving me the evil eye. You know how like you do, like you need to calm this child down. Well, I kept trying to do it. Finally, I had to pick him up and walk out the doors. And we had a set of doors just like that, just to prove that your children know what they're thinking and what they're doing. As we hit those last doors right there, he yelled out, "Pray for me, pray for me." So they've been listening in church. They kind of knew what was going on. So I am truly blessed to be here. We're going to have some fun tonight. We're going to talk about some things that can be some tough subjects, but at the end of the day, it's something that we need to talk about. The Bible says there's appointed once for a man to die, and we need to talk about what happens if people get sick, if they go to nursing homes, what happens to your stuff. We use that word a lot in estate planning because I don't like the word estate planning. It kind of conjures up images of you have to have a lot to have an estate. And here's the reality is, everybody's got an estate. Okay? Because all your estate is just the stuff that you've accumulated. And when you go home to be with the Lord, that stuff ends up going down to many times the next generation. And it's been our experience that sometimes when money is on the table, people's true characters tend to come to the surface. Amen? It just does this. And listen, we're all brothers and sisters here. One of the reasons we do this at night is so that we can talk honestly about this. And if you have questions, feel free to stop me. I'll be happy to answer them. Sometimes there's questions that people have had their whole lives, like, how does this particular thing work? I've had many people that didn't understand how the probate process works. So we're going to talk about some of those things and maybe how we can avoid those kind of things. How many of you feel like avoiding a problem may be better than trying to solve a problem? You think so? And I've noticed here that this is like a typical Free Will Baptist church. Everybody starts at the 50-yard line and goes back. Maybe I'll just bring the pulpit right down there. Do you really? All right, well, let's talk a little bit about this. Feel free to interrupt me if you want. We're going to teach some common sense rules on how things work and how your estates can be handled in a manner that you desire. We coordinate with qualified Christian attorneys to make sure these things happen, and we're able to do it at a large discount for our church members, and we help you people in our congregations make wise decisions. And the idea is, the Bible talks about we need to be as wise as a serpent, but as gentle or as harmless as a dove. Now, there are three ways that you can handle your estate. Number one is you can do nothing. Now, let me ask you this. How many people here believe that sometimes it's better to put things off until tomorrow? Any procrastinators in the room? There's some honest people. You know, if I had a prize, I would give you that. Maybe Barry will buy you dinner. That'll be the prize. But at the end of the day, we've actually had people that tend to put this off and say, someday I'm going to get this done. Someday. But what's the problem with that thinking? Someday never comes. How many of you know who Dave Ramsey is? You know who Dave Ramsey? Dave Ramsey said 65% of Christians have no plan in place in writing to make sure that their things are taken care of. And I think the biggest reason is because of that procrastination issue. So we're going to talk about not procrastinating. The second way that you can handle your stuff is called, kind of an old-fashioned way really, it's called a will. Now, everybody knows what a will is, but the bottom line is a will is simply a document that you leave behind to dictate to the courts of how you want your stuff done. Now, the problem in Tennessee is this, is that in Tennessee, anybody that is what they call an interested party can contest a will. How many of you ever heard of a will being contested? Okay, that's what that process is. And the other issue is you can write your own will yourself, or the most expensive attorney in Tennessee can write your will. But at the end of the day, it all ends up at this place called probate court. Probate court is the judicial application for the administration and distribution of your estate. It can be a long process. It can be a frustrating process. I've been involved with a number of these, and the average probate in Tennessee takes about a year to get done. Now, let me explain something. There are two probates that people tend to get involved with. One is what they call the simple probate or an abbreviated probate, and that's when a spouse goes home to be with the Lord. All of those things that are held together typically don't go to probate because in Tennessee, you have what's called tenants by the entirety, which means that everything is owned together. So at that point, everything goes to the surviving spouse. There is a little bit of stuff that needs to be done, but it's not difficult typically. The second probate that people get involved with is when the second spouse goes home to be with the Lord and stuff goes down to children and to heirs. And this is where the problem lies. Because the problem is oftentimes heirs are at different parts of the country. There's stuff that needs to be done. It can be a very difficult and expensive process. So let me ask you this. How many of you think that maybe avoiding that whole probate process might be a blessing? You think maybe that would be a good idea? We're going to talk about that. The third way that you can do this is called the revocable living trust. This is what I've got. It's what Brother Barry and Jenna have. It's basically a legal entity that we put together while you're alive to title your assets into the trust, so the trust becomes the owner of your stuff, and you own the trust. The trust becomes the owner of everything, and you own the trust. When you go home to be with the Lord, the trust then delivers all of those assets to your intended beneficiaries, and this is the key, with no probate needed. So the idea is we want to pre-probate everything into our trusts and deliver it to our children or to our intended beneficiaries. And we're going to talk about how we do that tonight. So open your workbook that you've got. The very first page, we're going to talk about taxes. We live in the greatest country in the world, although there's been some things that have changed recently that are difficult. But the bottom line is this: we get to pay taxes. Right now, if you earn income, what type of tax do you pay? What? Income tax. Own property here in Tennessee, what do you pay? Property tax. You go to the mall to buy something for your grandkids, what do you pay? Sales tax. There's another tax called capital gains tax, and a lot of people don't understand this. And I'm gonna walk down here because you need to see how this works. A capital gain, and let me give you a little bit of my background. I'm a former NASD broker-dealer. My job was to help millionaires make sure that their estates were settled, to make sure that everything went to the way that they wanted it. 8 years ago, the Free Will Baptist denomination approached us and said, we would like you to start working with our people. We want you to bring $1 million kind of thing, but we don't want to pay $1 million for it. So at the end of the day, we figured out how to do it a lot cheaper. So bottom line is this. A capital gain, does anybody know what a capital gain is? Yes. What is it? Oh, you didn't know I was going to call on you, did you? That'd be the last time he raises his hand, won't it? A capital gain is simply realized appreciation on a capital asset. So in other words, I bought something down here and I sold it up here and I made a profit, right? Now, does the United States government want some of that profit? What do y'all think? Yeah, absolutely. Currently, that number is a minimum of 15%. Which means, let's take a little example. Let's say back in the 70s, you bought a cabin up in Gatlinburg. And let's say you paid $40,000 for the cabin, okay? Now, 2021, you decide to sell that cabin, and let's say you sell it for $140,000. What was your capital gain? $100,000. Does the government want some of that? Yeah, we know that they want at least $15,000. So you get to write a check to the federal government, not counting what Tennessee might want, for $15,000. Now, how many of you think that's a great idea? You know, in all the churches in all the United States that I've been in teaching this, and we've taught thousands of people, nobody's, well, I tell you about one person said they thought that was a great idea. She worked for the IRS. She thought this is a great idea. Most of us want our kids to get our stuff, right? And this is where, as Free Will Baptists, we make the critical mistake. We simply say, well, you know what? I'm just going to put my kids' name on the deed to the stuff with me now. That way, when I die, my kids will automatically get it tax-free and probate-free. Do y'all think that's true? No. First of all, let me explain. Tennessee practices probate, but we'll talk about that in just a second. But the moment you put somebody's name on something you already own, you've just created a co-what? Co-owner, which means for tax purposes, the basis in that asset is considered to be the same by the child as it was the parent. Let me translate this. What that means is I've got 4 kids, all right? I'm going to talk about my kids tonight, but I got 4 of them. So let's say in this example, this is me. I want all 4 of my kids to get an equal share of this. But if I put my children's name on this asset, when I die, my children go to sell the asset, the Internal Revenue Service goes, wait. You kids were on deed with your parents while they were still alive. Therefore, your basis in that asset is the same as your parents' was. Which means, church, what did I just pass on to my 4 kids? A tax bill. Now, is that what I wanted to do? No, I just wanted my kids to be able to get this. I want you to circle this in your book, the word stepped up cost basis. This is worth you coming out just to learn this tonight. The United States government says if you will allow your heirs to inherit what you want them to have, not put their names on it while you're alive, but they get it at your passing, then the government will raise or step up the underlying value of the asset to reflect its value at the time of your passing, not the time you originally acquired it. So going back to our example, we paid $40,000 for this unit. We sold it for, or was going to sell it for $140,000. But because we have a revocable living trust, all of our stuff is titled into the trust. It's just a different way to own stuff. It's just different. So now the trust owns this. When we pass, the trust gives this to our heirs. But because it was in a trust, they get to take it at the current market value of $140,000, which means how much in tax did they pay? 0. This is one of the advantages of understanding how these rules work for you. Now, that's really the second most important reason to never put your children's name on anything you own. The number one most important reason is because of liability. Now think this through for a second. If your son's name is on your house and your son gets into an accident on the freeway and kills somebody, is your house at risk? Yeah. What about this? What if you put your daughter's name on your bank account and your daughter gets in trouble with the IRS? Could the IRS FIFA or seize your bank account? Freeze it? Absolutely. And then it's up to you to get it undone. We had and I know we don't like to talk about divorce, but it happens. What happens if your son's name is on your house and him and his wife get divorced? Could your house now become part of a divorce settlement? Yeah, these are issues that we have to think about. I'll give you a case. Down in Alabama, we have a situation where we've got a mom. She is in her 80s. Her estate was worth about $280,000 was the whole estate was worth. She didn't. She was a widow, obviously. So she decided to put her son on the bank account with her, predominantly a CD. Put her son's name on the bank account because if she got sick or hurt, she needs somebody to be able to access this money, right? Which is a good idea. Well, it turns out that the son ends up going through a divorce. The divorce attorney says, wait, the son, your ex-husband, he's talking to the wife, your ex-husband is the co-owner of his mother's $280,000 CD, which means that half of that is imputed to be the son's. Now, as evangelical Christians, we understand imputation. That's what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross. He imputed his righteousness to us, and we in turn imputed our unrighteousness to him. That's why he died for us once and for all. But it's actually an accounting term. It actually means move from one side of the ledger to the other. Well, the court, in the legal sense, agrees that half of that $280,000 CD is imputed to be the son's, which means that the ex-wife gets half of his half, or $70,000. Mom has to write a check for $70,000 to her ex-daughter-in-law. Now, I know we're all blood-bought, born-again Christians in here, but privately, would that have been a problem if that happened at your house? What do y'all think? I was teaching this in Alabama, and this beautiful little saint who was probably, she was elderly, like 200 years old maybe. She was just a tiny little thing, and she said in her South Alabama accent, she said, well, Brother Mike, that wouldn't have been a problem in my house. I'd have just shot her. I said, I must be in Alabama, roll tide or something like that. But at the end of the day, do bad things happen to good people? Yeah, every day. So we need to be careful about that. Other methods people try to use to settle their estates are PODs and TODs. POD means payable on death. TOD means transfer on death. These are perfectly fine, however, they're incomplete, because a POD means you can access somebody's bank account when they die. Well, therein lies the problem. What if you have a stroke? You're not dead. There's no death certificate to take to the financial institution. You can't access the money. You need powers of attorney and that kind of thing. And once somebody's had a stroke or become incapacitated, they can't enter into a power of attorney. So it's a very difficult process. The best way, I want you to circle this word, beneficiary. The best way to get stuff to the next generation is through a beneficiary designation. Now, the issue is not all things can have a beneficiary designation. So let me explain this. We all know things like IRAs and 401ks and things like that don't go through probate because those are outside of the probate purview. In other words, life insurance goes directly to the person. IRAs, TSPs, things like 401ks, all of that goes directly to the intended beneficiary. But unfortunately, things like real estate, houses, certain stock accounts, bank accounts, your personal stuff, your guns, your tools, anything like that has to be done typically through a will to go through the probate courts to distribute. Your will is the document that inserts you into that probate procedure. I've had people sitting in our groups and they're like, well, my lawyer told me I had a will, I don't have to go through probate. That's absolutely false. The will is the document that inserts you into probate. It's the entry ticket into probate. We want to avoid that. Does that make sense? Say, Okay, let's go on to the next page. Let's talk about the inheritance tax. Some of you have heard about this called the death tax. There's a real concern under the new administration that they're going to really bring this back in such a way as to lower it. It used to be that, in fact, for the moment, it still is, that there's an $11 million exemption. In other words, if you're worth less than 11, actually I think it's 11.25, something like that, you don't have to worry about this inheritance tax. In other words, when you die, they add up all your stuff, and if you fall under this number, then you don't have to worry about this tax, right? Most of us, I don't have to worry about this tax. I'm not worth $11 million, that's for sure. But some people, may have to worry about this, right? But the present administration is seeking to, and I would not be surprised to see, that they lower this number so that more people would be affected. In fact, it wasn't that many years ago. It used to be $600,000, okay? There are people in Congress that want to eliminate the number altogether and just say, there's just a tax on this. And by the way, this tax is like 40%. It's huge. So there's a lot of issues going on with that right now. So, but for the moment, we don't really have to worry about this. But many people say, well, I'm going to start giving my heirs stuff now. I want to enjoy giving my children or my grandchildren stuff now. And that's great. It's absolutely wonderful. You can give every year to your heirs up to $15,000 without it being a taxable event in their life. Okay? So if you have money and you got kids or grandkids and you want to give them money, you can give them up $15,000. Beyond that, they've got to claim it. It's a tax implication. But a lot of people, do that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. The problem is some people use this as their estate plan and they just give all of their stuff to their kids. Well, here's the issue. What happens if you live longer than you think you're going to live? And what happens if you need some of that money back? What are the odds of your children having it to give back to you? Like zero, right? Go live with them. That'll teach them, right? But at the end of the day, listen, if you want to give money to your kids, God bless you. But that's not an estate plan, okay? A better answer is to do what I've done and form a living trust, okay? First of all, living trusts are changeable. Once you form the trust and it owns all of your stuff, you can tweak things, you can change it. It's very simple to be able to do, but the trust becomes the owner of our stuff. Attorneys tell us that living trusts are very smart. Educated people have been using them for years. They're very simple to use, and they're very cost effective in the big picture of estate planning. If you were going to settle your estate for 80 years of living, some people will spend $15,000, $20,000 or dollars or more. I mean, I've seen families burn through money with lawyers trying to do all of this kind of stuff. So the average living trust, to get a lawyer to put together the documents, mind you, this is just the documents, you're probably looking at anywhere from like $3,000 to $5,000 to be able to do. And while that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but at the end of the day, to settle your life's estate for $5,000 seems pretty reasonable in the big picture. Now, the Free Will Baptist Foundation has figured out a way to do it cheaper. So just relax. But this is what you pay kind of out in the world. And I've seen people pay much, much more than this. But what we're kind of talking about is that if you were going to go out there and do something like this, you'd see probably this in this price range to be able to do it. And, I look at it this way. How many of you in here own a home? You own your home, or you're buying your home, that kind of stuff. Now, do you pay homeowners insurance here? Like in case the house gets hit by a tornado or something like that? And I'm just going to take a wild guess, and I may be off. But how much? Let's say you pay. Is it maybe $1,000 a year? Is it more? Probably more. So let's just say, for our argument's sake, that's $1,000 a year. And let's say you live in that house for 30 years. How much did you just pay on the chance that your house might get hit by a tornado? You paid $30,000, right? And maybe it would get hit by a tornado, but most of the time it doesn't. But you just paid $30,000 just in case that it does, right? Well, we know with certainty, the Bible tells us that we're going to die someday. We know that for certain. So we need to put something together to be able to do that. And again, the Free Will Baptist Foundation has figured out how to do it for $2,700. And what they do with that is you don't pay all $2,700 up front. You pay $300 up front, and then they put the plan together for you. They pay the lawyers. They pay everybody involved. And then the balance of $2,400, they've already paid on your behalf. You just pay them back $100 a month for 24 months. No interest. It's just your foundation doing this for you. So I'm telling you, we do this as a non-profit ministry. We don't make a profit doing this. But by being able to get people to be able to do this for $100 a month, makes it a real affordable to have something quality in place. Now, let's talk real quick about what happens in situations where, let me ask you this. How many of you believe that it's possible that you might become incapacitated? Could that happen? I mean, if you had a stroke, or let's say leaving church tonight, you got in a car wreck and you became incapacitated. Could that happen? Sure it could, right? Well, how many of you could get a phone call that maybe a member of your family has been hurt or become incapacitated? Could that happen to any of us in this room? Church, it happened to me. On April 10th of 2005, my 17-year-old daughter was on a boat at Lake Allatoona, Georgia. Kid driving the boat didn't know what he was doing, and my daughter was thrown from the boat, and the boat ran her over, and the propeller went down the left side of her body, cut her left arm off, cut her left breast off, went down her leg, severed her Achilles tendon, and broke her leg. She went into the water without a life jacket on. She was in the water for 2 minutes before they were able to come back and get her. These are all just high school kids, last day of spring break. They managed to get her in the boat, called 911. EMT met them on the dock, started working on her. A helicopter comes, and she's medevaced from Lake Altoona to Grady Hospital, which is in downtown Atlanta. Meanwhile, we get a text that said, Katie's been life-flighted to Grady, hurry. So we've been in a boating accident, she's been in a boating accident, life-flighted to Grady, hurry. So we make our way down to Grady, and when we get there, she's on life support. And she's in this room. The doctors grabbed us and said, okay, we've got a lot of stuff to do, to cover. And but before we can do anything, you've got to start signing all of these legal papers. Now, I didn't think about it at the time, but that's the first time that the legal world kind of it puts itself into your life. So we're signing these papers. We prayed with the doctors. They went in and had to do surgery on her. And by the grace of God, she lived. She's an amputee now, but she lived. But at the time, we didn't know what was going to happen. Within a short period of time, I want to say it was like 3 days, we had lawyers approaching us wanting to represent her because she has a case now against the boat, the owners of the boat and this kind of stuff. And I didn't really want to hear anything about this. Fortunately, a member of our Sunday school class was a lawyer. And he sent these guys packing. And he said to Mike, thank God Katie's alive. We can deal with this other stuff later. But he said something I'll never forget. He said, thank God she wasn't 18 years old yet. See, she was 17 and 9 months when the accident occurred. Actually, 17 and 3 months. She was 9 months away from being 18. And I looked at Scott and I said, what do you mean? He said, think, if she was 18 years old, what would she be? An adult, a legal adult. And guess what? You can't give instructions or any kind of rules, anything like that, for any other adult in America if you don't have something in writing called an advanced medical directive. We didn't have any of that in place. We had nothing in place. Nothing. And he looked at me and he says, matter of fact, while we're on the subject, if that was you lying in the hospital bed, your wife would be in serious trouble because I had nothing to give her about what she could and couldn't do to save my life and to go through all of these extraordinary measures. And she had nothing for me. I mean, we were both in this situation. And that's when he looked at us and said, when this is all done, you guys need to go out and do a comprehensive estate plan. You need to make sure that you have a revocable living trust. You title your stuff in it. You and your wife give each other powers of attorney. Give your children maybe the alternate powers of attorney. Make sure that your family's covered. Because the one thing that you don't want to have happen is a bunch of strangers, lawyers, judges making your decisions. And let me tell you this, as a blood-bought, born-again Christian, as your brother in Christ, and I mean this from my heart, I know this because I live this. The last thing we needed at that crisis time in our lives was more trouble. We didn't need a bunch of lawyers. We didn't need judges. We didn't need other people. We were surrounded by people that loved us. We did not want the outside world coming in making these decisions. So when the dust settled, we went out and formed the Wooten Family Revocable Living Trust. We took, my wife became a trustee of the trust. I became a trustee of the trust. We took all of our stuff and titled it into the trust. Our house isn't done being paid for, but the deed is titled into the trust's name. Our assets are titled into the trust's name. If something happens to me, my wife is protected. Something happens to her, I'm protected. Along with that, we got powers of attorney to each other. We made our children the alternate powers of attorney. So if something happened to Sherry and I while we were together, our kids could do stuff. And by the way, this is another piece of advice. Don't ask your children to make decisions like pulling the plug on you. That's not fair. You make the decision of how you want to go should that eventuality occur, and you ask your children to honor your wishes that are in writing. Does that make sense? I mean that from the heart. If you forget everything that I teach tonight, remember that. Making sure that your family's protected because you've got the right documents in place. And as the foundation has done, we've done about 2,200 Free Will Baptist families have this in place now. Everybody always wants to know what happened to Kate. Well, she made a recovery. She couldn't she couldn't do a prosthetic or anything like that. But it turns out that she graduated high school. She went on to college, and she is now one of the head media people at the Weather Channel in Atlanta, Georgia. And she, on Friday the 13th, May 13th, we had a mountaintop experience, and I got to walk her down the aisle. And that's Katie. And I say, to God be the glory. We serve an awesome God. Now, since then, she's just had a baby. So that was our number 6 grandchild. So she's got a little baby. We do a lot of helping with it because it's hard when you have one arm, doing a lot of the stuff that we take for granted, quite frankly. And I'll tell you a funny story about Kate. She was my strong-willed child. Did any of you got strong-willed children? I mean, you can raise them all the same way, and some of them are she's just a strong-willed one. It was about a year after the accident, and she's making this recovery. We're going to lunch, and she met us for lunch, and she said, guess where I'm going today? I go, where? She goes, skydiving. I said, are you kidding me? After all of this, you're going skydiving. Yep, she did it. She went skydiving. But I tell you what, to God be the glory. We're grateful every day. And I know that every family has a story that you deal with in these kind of situations. This just happens to be ours. And I'm grateful. And I'll tell you, I was talking to Katie not too long ago, and she knows that I tell her story. And if you want to read about her, she became a spokesman for the American Red Cross. Her story is on their website. Her married name is Shuford, Shuford. Katie Shuford. If you go to the American Red Cross website, you can read her story, and it's inspired a lot of people. And Romans 8:28 is true, isn't it? Because of this accident, thousands of Free Will Baptist families have heard about it. It's been incorporated in our story and in our presentation, and families have gone and got their documents put together to protect their families from eventualities like this. And I say, thank God we serve our God. All right, let's start wrapping this up. Let's talk about powers of attorney. Everybody should have a power of attorney. It's basically giving authorization from one person to another person. Problem is twofold, really. Number one, the power ceases at death. I used to handle lots and lots of money, and I had $1 million account in the brokerage business, and this was invested a certain way. And this gentleman's son had his power of attorney, and the son did not agree with the way his father's money was invested. Well, dad dies, right? Son calls us up pretty quick and says, I need to move all of that. My dad died. I'm his power of attorney. Sorry, the power died the moment your dad died. Thank God in that situation. He'd have lost it. But we need to make sure that we understand that. The other issue is if you're incompetent, if you're declared incompetent, if you've had a stroke, get dementia, Alzheimer's, then you can't enter into a power of attorney. So we need to make sure that that stuff is done beforehand. In fact, in my opinion, having an estate plan, the biggest reason to have an estate plan is incapacitation. Because if you become incapacitated, you don't want other people, lawyers, being involved in your business. You want people that you trust. You want people that you appoint to be able to do this. If you choose not to have something in place, you run the risk of court supervision, attorney's fees, medical consultations, record keeping. I've been involved with dozens of these kind of guardianship situations. It's never good. Let me just say that again. It's never good when the court has to decide things. You want to decide those. As Christians, we're told to put our houses in order. This is something that we need to do. And this is why, as a denomination, we felt that incumbent upon us that our people need to have this in place. Again, we don't want to make a profit. We just want to make sure that you got quality stuff in place. I want you to write the word avoidable across this page in your book if you've got the Free Will Baptist plan. And I'm going to tell you what that plan is here in just a second. Let's touch on probate. Probate is, again, we talked about the courts overseeing things. The people that really benefit are creditors, lien holders, lawyers. It can be an expensive process. If you've ever been through a bad probate, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Oftentimes there's court involved. You get families that are contesting things. And even within the Free Will Baptist denomination, I've had situations like that. One of the things that I do is when somebody dies, I go out and I help the family. And there's no charge to them. Our foundation pays that. But bottom line is I've seen families that get real frustrated with each other. And so it's something that we need to make sure that we understand. I want you to understand what the actual costs are. Anywhere from about 4 to 6% of whatever you have gets lost in probate. Okay? So, and I know you don't think you're millionaires, or maybe some of you are millionaires, I don't know. But at the end of the day, just think about if you've got a house and you've got some stuff and you've got, and it adds up to $300,000, $400,000. Before you know it, you get 4%, 6% of that gets eaten up. That's a lot of money. That's not going to your kids. That's going to a bunch of lawyers. I propose it'd be better for it to go to kingdom work somewhere than a bunch of lawyers. That's my feeling. My wife and I we're biblical tithers. We actually tithe on our estate. 10% of our estate is going to kingdom work when we're both gone. And our children know that, and they're fine with that. 4 issues of probate time. Takes 6 months to 2 years to get through it. Cost, everything, it becomes public information, which is really kind of a challenge. And the emotional toll of having to do it. I want you to write the word avoidable across this page as well. Again, if you have the Free Will Baptist plan, all of this is avoidable. So let's talk about the plan real quick. The Free Will Baptist plan contains 3 components. Number 1, all the legal documents done by competent, qualified Christian attorneys. We need to get that done. The goal here is to make sure it's easy on our families when we go home to be with the Lord. So we need to reverse engineer this. So the way we have to do that is the very first thing is we got to get documents. We got to get quality documents done. So we've already taken care of that. The second thing we need is lifetime support. So as life goes on, if you've got questions or there's things that change, you need to be able to call the Free Will Baptist Foundation and we'll help you through that. There's no extra cost. That's all part of this. And then the last most important thing we do is when you go home to be with the Lord, somebody like me will come out and sit down with your family and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. There's no fee for that. That's all part of that $100 a month program for 24 months. I mean, it's really, really good. There's nobody that we know that does anything like this. So we want you to think about setting up your trust and who you'd want to put in charge of handling your stuff if you were unable to. Now my wife and I chose each other first, right? Then we chose our oldest son, and then we have 3 daughters, then our daughters in order to be able to do that. But you can choose whoever you want to be able to do this. Once the documents are done, we'll help you with the funding of the trust. And funding is just a $10 legal word. All it means is making sure that all your stuff has got your trust's name on it. It's kind of like an umbrella. We need to make sure the trust has got all of its assets, the name on all the assets. We'll help you through this process. It's kind of like a safe. You buy the safe, we'll help you put the stuff in it. We don't want any of your money. We don't want any of your stuff. We're just here to guide you on how to do it, okay? These are just paperwork changes. What you have to understand is that funded assets do not go through probate. They avoid probate. So we want to make sure the trust is funded correctly. So here's a Free Will Baptist couple. They're joint trustees. They set up a trust and they're joint trustees. And let me say this. Men, typically men pass before women do. Do you know why that is? And don't say it's because we have to live with women, because we don't want to say that. It's because we've been kind of used up helping our wives get through life. Serving them. Well, that's what my dad said. Actually, my mom said it so she could have some moments of peace before she went home to be with the Lord. But men, we die first, typically, okay? So in this situation, spouse passes away. Guy passes away. The wife calls the foundation. In the book that you get, it says there's a number. You just call the foundation. Our Free Will Baptist Foundation is perpetual. So there'll be somebody that's there. We'll then send somebody out to help her. She's now the sole trustee of the trust. By the way, if you're a widow or widower, this is where you start. You're the sole trustee of the trust. She goes on, lives another 5-10 years. She goes home to be with the Lord. Then the foundation actually sends somebody else out to help the successor trustees. The assets are distributed to the kids. This takes 1 to 2 days at your kitchen table, not 1 to 2 years in a Tennessee courtroom. Does that make sense? Do you think that makes common sense? What do y'all think? Yeah, it does. So let's talk about your estate. You've worked your whole life for it. Some of you got real responsible kids. Some of you may have a wild child in there. Some of you may have a special needs child. All of these are things that are taken care of inside the trust of how you want things distributed. We'll guide you through that. And then let me tell you something that's real exciting. When God's involved in stuff, big things happen. When we first started doing this, we encouraged people to leave some type of ministry gift to a ministry that they're passionate about. Whether it's this campus, whether it's missions, whether it's missionaries, whether it's our schools, whatever. But we all want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. So at the end of the day, my wife and I left 10% of our estate to kingdom work. And our children are getting the other 90%. That may be something that you choose that you want to do. You don't have to, but you may choose that you want to. And it's all inside of your trust. And to date, we're somewhere in about $22 million has been left to kingdom work through this ministry. And I say to God be the glory. Because think what's going to happen. I was noticing as I was walking around your building, the history that you guys have got here with the photographs back here. Those people, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, they laid the groundwork for what you're enjoying now. It's our job to lay groundwork for our kids and grandkids. That's what we're supposed to do. They did a really good job of it. That's something that I hope we all do. So in conclusion, why would you choose the Free Will Baptist estate plan rather than just go find some lawyer to do it? Well, number one, it protects you from court-created guardianship should you become incapacitated. Number two, your assets avoid probate. They go privately to your heirs, however you have them written down, and we come out to make sure that that happens, and then you can control the distribution the way that you want. This is going to give you peace of mind. Every one of us lays in bed at certain times of our lives going, wonder what's going to happen when I die. Wonder what Billy's going to do. Wonder what Sally's going to do. You know, you need to put these things in place. So the state of Tennessee gives you a choice. You either have to do a will or you have to do a trust. Now, if you choose nothing, then the state of Tennessee automatically writes a will when you die. Statutory, they write a will. My advice is do the trust. It's a whole lot better than the will would be. Secondly, these are the comparisons. State of Tennessee says you got to do something, so we put the comparisons in your book. And then lastly, my wife and I did this because we're the best people to settle our estate. We didn't want judges doing it. We didn't want lawyers doing it. We wanted us to do it. And it's very satisfying when it's done. And your kids will thank you when it's done. Because I can tell you, as the man that goes out, that sits with families when you die, I've been in both situations where people have put this together and it's been easy and it's been as pleasant of an experience as you could hope for. And I've been in other ones where they don't have this together and families are fighting because they don't know what you wanted. Take the time to do this. If you choose to do this, then the Free Will Baptist documents will be all done, everything that you need, powers of attorney, medical directives, living wills, the whole 9 yards, revocable living trust, the whole thing. You'll have lifetime support from the foundation for the rest of your life. Then when you pass, somebody will come out to assist the family. And when the second person passes, they'll come out one more time to assist the family. All of this is included in that plan. We're going to guide you every step of the way on this. So we think, who should really have an estate plan? Really anybody that has anything that they want to protect. Probably everybody. But if you think, I had a pastor in Florida say to his congregation, if you think you might die, you probably need this. I thought, that's a great word. I'm going to use that. But if you want to simplify things for your heirs, if you want to keep the courts out of your business, protect yourselves, protect your family. All of that is included in this. Now, is Judge Whitaker on this? All right. We're going to talk about this in just a second. In your book, you have a form that looks like this. Okay? You can fill out the top form. That's just your personal information. I want us to go through this middle portion and check the items that apply to you. So if you're a real estate owner or if you're buying a house, put a check mark there. If you've got health concerns, put a check mark there. If you've got some family concerns, put a check mark there. You need to have documents in place. If avoiding probate or avoiding guardianship makes sense, put a check mark there. Or if just keeping the courts out of your family business makes sense, put a check mark there. Now, everybody look up here. The Free Will Baptist Foundation, and I've already told you what they're going to do. They are paying this on your behalf. In other words, they pay the lawyers, they pay everybody involved, and they do this. And it costs them $4,000, $4,500 when it's all said and done to get everything done. They only ask you to pay $2,700 of it back. You pay $300 down when you do this, and then when we deliver your documents, it's $100 a month for 24 months, and you're done. Bottom line, if you think this makes sense, I'm going to give you a code word that you're going to write on this form. And after service tonight, you're going to exchange your form for a starter kit. And in this starter kit is all the lawyer information, everything you need in order to get started on this process. Obviously, Barry's going to be the one that delivers this. We don't know your private information. We don't know it. When you talk to the lawyer, it's all privately, and it's all done, 99.99% of it is done over the phone. So when you talk to the lawyer and talk about stuff, Barry won't know it, I won't know it, anything like that. It's all between you and the lawyer. But when the documents are done, they have to be delivered, and Barry will be doing the delivery because he acts as a notary. You've got to sign things and stuff like that. We'll help you through this process. So if you think this makes sense, and in a sense, I love what Pastor said, is that you've got an in with us because Barry works for the foundation. If you think this makes sense, here's the code word to put on your form. I don't have a code word to put. No, I'm just teasing you. Here's the code word. FWB. This tells our lawyers that you are part of this organization, because they do this and charge big money for other people. But if you're an FWB, you're part of our group. Okay? Now, I'm going to, and then you can put your preferred contact time down. We'll have an initial consultation where we talk to you over the phone, just ask you some questions. Now, I think Judge Whitaker's on after this, right? All right, we have a free will Baptist who is a judge. In fact, he's in Arkansas and sits on one of the highest courts in Arkansas. We actually did Judge Whitaker's plan. And if we can do a judge's plan, I guarantee you we can do anybody's plan, because it was good. It was good. But he gave us a testimonial, and I want you all to, do we have sound on this, Lisa? Sweet. Okay. I haven't seen the yellow light yet.
Hello, my name is Philip Whitaker. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am a lifelong Free Will Baptist. I am an ordained minister within the denomination. I also have been blessed by God. I am a lawyer, and I've had the privilege of serving 19 years as a judicial officer in the state of Arkansas. I know that you've seen a presentation concerning the necessity and the urgency of some estate planning options. I would just like to address with you briefly my thoughts on this particular topic. First of all, let me tell you that in my experience as a judicial officer, I think it is essential that each home consider some estate planning. I know that you've heard some information about some trusts and how that can fit into your estate planning. As a judicial officer, I would strongly encourage you to give some consideration to the formation of a trust if it meets your particular needs. From personal experience, I can tell you that within my own family, my wife and I have developed trusts as an estate planning option for meeting not only the needs of the distribution of any assets that we might have to our children and our intended beneficiaries, but also to help extend the kingdom of God. So, give some strong consideration to the trust as an option that might meet your needs and what you intend to do, not only for your children, your family, and your beneficiaries, but how you can also distribute some of your assets of your estate to continue the ministry of Jesus Christ even after you've left.
I'm going to finish with this quote, and then I'm done. The just man walketh in his integrity, his children are blessed after him. This is from Proverbs 20, verse 7. It's my pastor's favorite verse. And when we did this, I felt obliged to put it on there because it speaks directly to what we're trying to do. Now, let me say this. Before I turn it back over and dismiss everybody, does anybody have any questions about what we talked about? Don't be shy. There's no wrong answers. There's no bad questions. If you have any questions, feel free. Yes, sir. That's a great question. He said, what's the implication of it being revocable? You want to typically stay away from irrevocable trusts because those are typically used for education purposes or people that have millions and millions of dollars and they could never touch it again. In other words, if it's designed for a specific purpose. A revocable trust means that you can make changes to it during your lifetime. But when you pass, it becomes irrevocable and your kids can't make changes. But while you're alive, you want it to be revocable so that you can add something to it, take something away from it. So we always want to look at revocable trusts. Okay? Make sense? All right. Any other questions? Sir. Okay. You're a sister? Just take all the money. That's what you do. Just take all the money. Spend it as fast as you can.
If she dies before I change that, what happens?
Well, we won't let that happen because we'll put her first and then we'll have some alternates in there. Yeah, we'll have backups. And we'll talk about backups. Once you make your plan, it's very easy to change. All we got to do is pick up the phone, and you don't even have to call us. You can call. Most of the time, people still call us because they're familiar with us. And then we'll just call the attorney and say, here's the change that needs to be made. There's a form that you fill out, but it's super simple. And by the way, let me say this. You will change your trust over, because you're a young man at the end of the day. Bottom line is, she just gave you a look. Man. You didn't know I just turned 82, so. Yeah, and let me say that. First of all, changes to a document are free. There's no charge for that. Let me explain that a little bit further because I want to make sure that we understand this. Changes to assets within the trust are free for life, okay? Now, the deal that we're able to work with all our lawyers is that if there are any changes that need to be done within the first year, there's no charge, right? Changes that are after a year incur a $75 charge. Now, what is a change? A change is not a change of assets. That's just adding stuff to the trust. A change is a change of personnel. In other words, if you put your sister in there to be your person and you don't put a backup, and then 5 years from now, you're like, I really don't like her much anymore. She's going to spend everything. I want to put Barry, which don't do that, but I want to put Barry in there. That'd be $75 because you're changing the personnel. But we won't let that happen. We'll say, who's your primary? Who's your secondary? And that way we don't have those issues. So it's, again, remember, this isn't a profit-making center. What we're trying to do is make sure that you've got documents in place. But changing them is very simple. I've had to change mine because we've had some new grandchildren. So we did an amendment to the trust. The attorney added the grandchild's name. Yes.
Can you talk about any current tax implications to the trust?
Ooh.
What you feel like future tax implications?
Ooh, that's a really, are you a banker? Okay, lawyer?
No, I play one on TV.
I stayed in a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I don't know what I'm talking about. She had a great question. She says, what about the tax implications of a trust, and what are the future tax implications? Great question. That's deep. First of all, here's the deal. Revocable living trusts are tax neutral. So you don't report any of this kind of stuff. It's all done under your Social Security number. So like interest on your house that you're paying, that's all still tax deductible, just like the trust itself is a tax neutral entity. Here's the issue that I think, and this is just a personal issue. Let me ask you a question. What do you think most lawyers have for their own family to protect their own family? You think they've got wills or do you think they've got trusts? What do you think? Trusts. They've got trusts. And here's the other implication. Congress, most of those people, or many of those people, what was their profession before they went into Congress? Lawyers. So I think what's going to happen is people that have trusts are going to be able to ride the coattails of the people that are more powerful because they're not going to change laws that are going to affect them. So the tax, I don't think there'll ever be a tax issue with a revocable living trust. I think at the end of the day, people that do wills, and that's all they have, or maybe nothing, where they have a big death tax situation, I think those people are going to suffer. And I'd even go one step further. Now, this is all free now. Let me just tell you this. I think what's going to happen is I think we're talking about hyperinflation. I think there's going to be inflation to where, we have a debt that's so massive that there's just no way our children and our grandchildren are going to be able to pay this debt. So, and again, I know we could discuss economics, but the bottom line is your question is valid. From a tax standpoint, it's tax neutral, so we don't have any issues. From the future, I think it will be segregated from that. And with what these people in Washington have, or powerful people in Tennessee, I think we're going to be the beneficiaries of that. Good question. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'm done. I'm going to turn it back over to the pastor. Bottom line is this. If you wrote FWB on your form, come see me. Your $300 that you're starting when you do this. If you want to write a check, you just make it to Cornerstone. If you want to put it on a credit card, we'll just snap a picture of it and they'll charge you $300 and then we'll tear it up. Bottom line is this, folks. We're all in this together. We need to make sure that our families are protected. As Free Will Baptist members, we need to make sure that your families are protected. Because sooner or later, our foundation is going to be dealing with your families. Typically, that's what happens. Or your pastor is. And those are sometimes difficult situations. Part of the reason we did this is it protects our pastors. Because sometimes family members will ask pastors legal questions. And when pastors give advice that could be construed as legal and it goes sideways, pastors can be sued. Churches can be sued. We don't want to do that. You have your own lawyer that can be able to do that for you. So, again, let me finish in prayer. If you wrote FWB on your form, come get it. I'll give you a starter kit. If you just have private questions, I'll come over here to the side. I'll be happy to answer your private questions for you. All right? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much, God, for your mercy. Thank you for what you did for us on the cross. I'm so grateful for Jesus Christ. I know that one of the things that we always ask for is the teams that are out teaching this to our people, keep them safe as they're traveling. Keep us all close and clean, and let us never be ashamed of the name of Jesus Christ. Let us be bold Christians, because that is the only way to heaven, is through Christ. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.